I'm really delighted to be co-chairing this session with Monica today, and I'm delighted that you've been able to join us to hear some wonderful speakers. If we could move on to the slide that has the panel overview, please. That's brilliant, thank you. I'm going to be starting the session with a brief introduction, and then I will be welcoming our speakers, Dr. Stella Louie, Lorna Crossan, and Soraya Mabouthia. And then Monica will facilitate a Q&A session with all of our panelists after the presentations and before bringing the session to a close. If we could move on to the next slide. Thank you. I'd like to start this session on listening to babies by briefly introducing the Lundy model of participation. Some of you may be familiar with this model already. It underpins the Anna Freud participation strategy, and that's why it's so important to our work here at the National Centre for Family Hubs. The Lundy model is rooted in Article 12 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which has two parts. The first is a child's right to express their views, and the second is an obligation for their views to be given due weight in matters that affect them. The Lundy model consists of 4 domains: space, voice, audience, and influence. However, it isn't always recognised that babies have rights and that they can communicate about matters that affect them. As a consequence, infants are not always given the opportunity for their views to be considered or given due weight. Next slide, please. The Lundy model has been used as a basis for the Voice of the Infant Best Practice Guidelines, which have been issued by the Scottish Government. This guide recognises that infants do have rights and that their voice should be facilitated and given the space, audience, and influence that it deserves. You can see an extract from that document here. It states that to give me the best start so that I can thrive throughout my life, I need to be seen as a person with my own feelings and rights. I depend on adults to interpret my cues and communications so that my rights are upheld and my voice is heard. We have recently started some work at Newcastle University, informed by the Lundy model and the Scottish Government Best Practice Guidance, using creativity and arts with babies as a way of facilitating their voices and giving their views due weight. We will be exploring the spaces that can provide babies with opportunity to express their views, the facilitation needed to support babies to express their views on matters that affect them, the audiences for infant voice across research, practice, and policy, and the influence that infant voice could have. So moving on to the next slide, I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Dr. Stella Louie, who is lead for Bellion Travelling Tutor. In 2023, Stella won the Nursery World Trainer of the Year award and is a freelance early years consultant, working with individual nursery settings, parents, nursery schools, local authorities, government departments, and charities. She provides training and consultancy and is particularly interested in observation and its part in supporting learning, development, and teaching. So welcome, Stella. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here. You can see from the title of my talk, there's a lot to cover in 15 minutes, working with families and staff on supporting babies and young children's communication, agency, and interaction with family members. The more I thought about this title, the more I was drawn to my work as a Froebelian. And what I have decided to do is share with you some work that's been around for more than 200 years. And I think what's important about this work is it starts with what parents and children can do. And I think that's a principle that runs deep in my life. I want to talk about Frederick Froebel. In 1844, and I'm going to repeat this, in 1844, he developed 50 mother songs. And he developed them for parents working or parents at home. And they were called mother songs because back in 1844, women, the only expectation of women were to be mothers and wives and to care for their children and their husbands. What I should add was Froebel was the first educator that introduced training of female teachers. So I think his role today is still quite significant. But in the time that I have, this is what I really want to say. He understood the importance of singing with babies, and he felt that parents, mothers, fathers were in a really, really good position to do this. What's really interesting, sort of 210 years on, the work of Sally Goddard Bly really does support what Froebel says, because Sally writes about the differences between children hearing music that comes from a parent or a caregiver and children hearing music that has been recorded. And I think just like Froebel, she argues that singing with babies encourages reciprocal communication, you know, that kind of give and take, that to and fro. And I think as educators and as parents, this is something we need to really think about. I want this session to be a little bit interactive, and I would love for you to just type in the chat when you're singing a song with children. What do you think of? What's important to you? What comes to mind? Are you thinking of the child's development? Are you thinking of their brain development? Are you thinking of their physical development? Are you thinking of their attachment? What do you think of when you're about to sing a song with babies and young children? I think Froebel believed that it was really, really important for us to sing songs to children that would help them to express themselves and to communicate. His idea was about developing songs where parents would have to use common words that related to the object that they were using with the child. So let's just say, for instance, you're feeding a child. So one of his songs is called All Gone. And within that, there is a huge amount of information about where the food comes from, where it's grown, etc. And he believed that it would, you know, just singing about real everyday objects that children are encountering would nurture the child's ability to imitate the sounds and the words and learn the names of objects. And I think what's really interesting about Frederick Froebel is that his mother songs, or family songs as we've renamed them, are progressional. You know, he starts with lullabies, and lullabies are really, really, really important because they help children to make really important attachments. You see lots of eye coordination when you've got a parent or a caregiver holding a child up close. You know, lullabies, we sing them when we're feeding children, we sing them when we're putting children to bed. That humming, that gentle soothing encourages a closeness with babies. And I think even in kind of busy nursery rooms, you tend to get things like, you know, humming and lullabies. So for Froebel, his progression, lullabies would be first. And, you know, if you've been around young babies and infants, you will know that it's at least 3 months before their hands open. So the next stage of development, he argues, is singing songs with children that absolutely uses the whole hand. So simple things like open and shut them, or, you know, you could be quite symbolic and do things with the baby, like round and round the garden. Hand songs are really, really important. And if you watch children and you watch them closely, you will be wary that very young children will use their whole hands for things. And I think, you know, quite often we kind of worry about things that are going to come later rather than thinking about what our children now need now. Yeah, so Froebel encouraged us to sort of sing songs, simple songs with simple actions, and just help children develop both their gross and their fine motor movements. And I think what's really important that you understand is that, you know, songs that involve the hands also include linking to brain development, neuroscience. It includes the senses, taste, touch, hearing, sight, smell. It also involves emotional development. You know, it increases the heart rate. It can fall, and it can, you know, when children are listening to particular songs, it helps children develop a sense of self, their culture, their community, the physical body, the mind, the body, the joints, the muscles, the tendons, and cognitive development. And I think what I said earlier on, sorry, can we go back a fair few slides? I'm not ready for these ones yet. I think when we think about songs, we sometimes don't think about the songs that we're singing with children. And I guess Froebel encourages us to think about children's development. So, you know, you start with lullabies, you then move on to whole hand songs. He then talks about songs that isolate the fingers. And like isolating the fingers, even at 57, isn't an easy thing to do. So you can appreciate how difficult isolating the fingers are for children. But I think what's really important that we understand when children are isolating the fingers and they're singing songs, we're introducing them to, and they're becoming aware of symbols. So my finger could be a person, or my finger could be a tree. All of this supports children's development. So we've got lullabies, we've got whole hands, we've got isolating the fingers. And I think what's also important that you understand with the songs that isolate the fingers, they really help children to kind of track and to fix their gaze. It helps them develop an understanding and an awareness of symbolic representation. And I think it's really important that we sing rhymes to children about things that they experience, whether it be nature, whether it be food, whether it be community. I think all of these things are really, really important part of children's development towards communication and literacy. You know, in this slide here, I've said that, you know, singing together forms really strong bonds. It supports language development. There's research that indicates that, you know, in order to know a song well, a child has to sing it over 1,000 times. So repetition is really important. And I think if I go from, you know, listening to Kirsten's talk, sometimes it's about starting with what you've got rather than what you haven't got. And I think if we encourage parents and carers to sing to children, there's a whole heap of things that we will be covering in a holistic way. You know, singing with children helps children to understand lots and lots of different emotions. I do a lot of work in South Africa, in Soweto, in a township called Kliptown. And I remember there were lots of things that they didn't have. That couldn't be my starting point. My starting point was what they did have, and singing and dancing was a huge part of their curriculum and what they did and what they could do. So for me, it was about building on that. I think the next stage of Froebel's progression is on the spot upper body movement, because we know I've just become a grandmother. We know that, you know, it's the kind of upper part of the body that develops first. And singing songs with children, you know, whether it's row, row, row the boat, or, you know, just things that kind of encourage them to use their upper body, their shoulders, their elbow, their wrists, you know, because remember, the young hands aren't fully developed until children are about 19 years old. So the things that we kind of get them to do with their whole upper body really, 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 really does matter. And I think, you know, when you think about action songs on the spot, children are beginning to understand pattern, rhythm, they're understanding their body, they're moving whilst they're singing. All of that is really, really important. I think also when we think about the songs that we introduce to children and we're introducing symbolic representation, whether it's row, row, row the boat or something else, we're helping children with creativity, we're helping them with memory, we're helping them develop sensitivity towards others, we're helping them coordinate their movement, communication, and we're increasing their vocabulary. And and also I think Froebel, even back in 1844, he understood that singing to babies and young children would release endorphins in the brain. And it's only now that kind of research is confirming what he knew back in 1844. I think, the next stage of the songs is getting children to be able to cross the midline. That is absolutely critical for development. And gross motor is linked to fine motor. And we need to encourage children to cross the midline, extending their arms across their body. Those things become really, really, really important. I think also, the body rhymes develops the baby's sense of self and awareness of their body. That is important. I mean, singing with children, I think there was some research done by Sasha Powell from the Froebel Trust that indicated that if us as educators sing with children, it is better for our mental health. And I think, hubs need to be in a position where they're encouraging parents to use what they have in order to support their children's holistic development. Froebel, once you've got the lullabies, you've got the whole hands, you've got the finger songs, you've got on the spot upper body, then you've got the whole body. And then he kind of moves into kind of more movement games, which tend to be kind of facilitated more by adults. I think singing with children is really, really important for their language development. Children, through singing, will develop phonological awareness, not just in isolation of a phonics session, but through singing and having objects that make meaning. Could I have the next slide, please? Yeah, I think the first songs contribute to the understanding of symbols and the development of imaginative play involving places and ideas and the wider world. So, I can be a tree, I can be a person. The rhythm and the beats of the song, the sequencings of the words, the phrases underpin mathematical development. I saw a little boy coming home from school a few weeks ago, and he was 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and he was doing his dance. I think, sometimes we compartmentalize learning for children, but actually children learn in a very holistic way. And I think singing with children is hugely important. And what I haven't said to you is that the 50 mother songs that Froebel developed, they were developed for families, for parents, not as entertainment, but as a resource, because he understood the roles that parents could play in their children's lives. Can I have the next slide, please? I think what I want to just say is some real important key messages. I think songs and rhymes that use the whole hand encourage eye contact and physical closeness and communication skills. That's hugely important. I think finger songs strengthen children's fingers and can be used to represent things. Now, what's important that you understand is when children are at school and doing number and letter work, those are representations of representations. So therefore, we need to think about how we're helping children understand this whole idea of symbolic representation. This helps children to develop an awareness of symbols, but it also helps children to track their fingers and fix their gaze. These are skills that are essential, absolutely essential for reading and writing. I think gross motor development is linked to fine motor development, and hence children needing to cross the midline. I think on the spot songs help children to develop their upper body movements whilst they sing. It helps them to develop a sense of rhyme and rhythm and beat. And the whole body songs help children to coordinate their movements, and it also encourages memory. And ultimately, singing with children is not just a beautiful and social activity that evokes lots of different emotions. It really does help children to develop communication, language, and literacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella.
Here's a link to a free pamphlet written by my colleague Jane Dyke on the Afrobealian approach to mother songs, and it really is worth a read. And just something else I just wanted to say, many years ago, I think back in 2009 in Southwark, when I was working for the London Borough of Southwark, we produced a beautiful lullaby video of parents from all different cultures singing with their children. And the one thing that stands out on that video is the bonding, is the attachment, is that relationship, it's the communication. Please don't underestimate what our parents already have, and singing with their children is a really, really important start. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. That was such an engaging presentation, and I loved all of the interactions going on in the Q&A in responses to singing to babies. It's something that we have been doing in our work with babies recently, and I know that when our early years practitioners left a little pause in the song, some of the babies have started to sing along, so that's really lovely to see. It is now time for our next speaker, but if you have any questions for Stella, please do put them in the Q&A and we'll try and get back to them later. But I am now delighted to welcome Lorna Crossman. Lorna is Parent Participation Lead here at Anna Freud and is supporting us to embed the voices of families in our work through her wealth of experience and expertise. So welcome, Lorna.
Thank you, Bronia. Thank you. Yes, so hi, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. So my name is Lorna Crossan, and I joined Anna Freud Centre as a parent champion volunteer back in 2019 and became a parent participation assistant about a year and a half ago. So I have two children, two boys, and I'm a single parent. My boys are 7 and 15. And throughout my life, I've always been interested in neuroscience, read tons of books, and I'm also a yoga teacher for children and families and a relaxation coach. And yeah, it's just really a privilege to be able to share my experience and my perspective and ideas. So it's good to be here. And yeah, so one of the sort of analogies I like to think about, you know, when we're sort of thinking about the environment to ensure that babies thrive, is almost like, you know, the environment of a small seed, because, you know, at first you can't see it, but we nurture it, we give it everything it needs in rich, fertile soil, and we're attentive, and then it emerges and we tend to it. And it gets off to a flying start, and it develops this strong stability of strong roots, and then a strong main stem. We might give it a bit of, you know, a little twig to support it so that it will then thrive. So we're very attentive, very responsive, and we provide that sort of nourishing, rich environment. And I guess, you know, similarly with babies, you know, we can't see the baby, you know, but it's there and it's developing, and we're you know, being attentive and things like that, you know, with what we eat. And, you know, we might, you know, sing. I know with both my children, I've done a lot of singing when you know, and when the baby was developing before my children were born. And you know, we're setting that strong foundation, and with that sort of attention and affection. So as they develop, they through to birth, they're developing this sort of stable, overarching sense of safety, protection, belonging, and those impressions will stay with them, you know, the impressions that that environment gives, through us being really attentive and looking out for their cues and things like that of what they need, through the eyes, through hand gestures, and a lot of it is very subtle, and yeah, movement as well, and they're very slight movements and things. So yeah, and it sort of develops realizations for the baby as well. So if we can just move on to the next slide, from that lovely baby picture, which is just gorgeous. Oh, and we've got another lovely, gorgeous baby picture. So again, you know, the strong, fertile, attentive environment. And, you know, for the first days, from the very first days of a baby's life, when it's born, it's tuning into their social environment, it's taking it all in, and it's all about building the connections in the brain. And, you know, during those first few months of life, more new connections form between neurons than any other stage in our lives. You know, so by having those strong connections forming, with that embedment of, you know, safety, stability, feeling protected, is really key. So, you know, the tone that's set in their environment is a tone that's rich in that sense of safety, and connection with their parents and caregivers. And, you know, when Stella was talking there, it really put a smile on my face, because I love singing. So, which is just as well, because I was, you know, I'm always singing throughout my pregnancy and throughout my children's infancy as well. And I think, you know, those feelings that it gave to me, it's also felt by the, you know, the baby as well. And for me, it's that feeling of openness, of expansion, of expression, and it comes from the inside out. So the baby is then developing those inner sort of senses as well, if you like. So it's really developing their imagination, their sense of joy and play, and also understanding their environment. I think it really helps with those realizations for themselves, which is just lovely. And, you know, and, you know, they're not going to come back and say, oh, you can't sing. So it really doesn't matter, you know, what we even when babies talk, even when we talk to babies, they seem to be a lot more receptive when we use a certain tone, high-pitched tone. They seem to really enjoy that. So again, you know, when we're talking about that strong environment, I think things like the tone of voice that we use, our body language, you know, these are all really important to set that environment. It really gives off those vibes that are really felt of feelings of love, of safety, of stability and protection. So yeah, if we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. And so, you know, within our brains, we've got it's almost like a little meerkat that's always sort of that keeps us safe, you know, that's always on the lookout for any sense of where we might be under threat. And you know, I've learned that it undergoes significant development during infancy, and actually starts to form during weeks 3 to 9 weeks of the embryo's development. And the amygdala has got accelerated growth between then, after the baby's born, 6 to 12 months of when it accelerated growth, and it plays a crucial role and the baby interpreting social and emotional meaning of sensory input, and really develops realizations in the baby as well. So for that sort of, you know, for the amygdala to really ensure that the tone is set so that the amygdala functions develops healthily, you know, we give this sense in the environment of safety, feeling seen through our facial expressions, through our tone, touch, body language. And again, it's all quite subtle, but this is what will really help, so that it sets the tone for the amygdala to develop healthily, and is not over activated when in those early stages. And I think, you know, those subtle forms of interaction that that we need to watch for cues for really help ensure that secure attachment for babies, and also teaches babies to sort of recognize their own emotional states and those of others. So, you know, these are essential for the sense of being able to self-regulate, and a sense of safety and trust as well, so that they learn to self-regulate as they develop and grow. So again, when I was saying about our tone of voice, the movement, touch, and you know, singing, having really soothing is for the baby, and it gives off these really you know, lovely chemicals in the body of oxytocin and endorphins and serotonin and all those really nurturing chemicals in our body. And I think, you know, I would love to share with you actually a couple of experiences that I've had with my children. And well, first of all, actually, what I found, and I really enjoyed the first presentation about, you know, when and how families thrive and in what environments. And you know, I was working full time, and then all of a sudden I'm at home with a baby alone. I had no family support. I had no network at all. It was literally just me. My baby's dad went off to work, so I was very alone. I was, you know, I felt really isolated, and I sort of, you know, that sense of wider belonging, if you like, came from my job, where I felt included, where all of a sudden I'm at home alone with my baby. And I really started, and I didn't anticipate this, I really started to long for and pine for my mum. So I lost my mum when I was younger, and I really never seen it coming, but I really had to make a big effort to get out there and start making new social connections, and not just for me, for my baby as well. So I think it's really important, especially how we live right now. It doesn't really enable families to feel that sense of belonging and connection, because we don't live where we have that connected family environment. We tend more nowadays to be able to, our worlds became much smaller, so families are all over the place. So there's so many families now who are living in isolation. So I think it's more important than ever to have that, because, you know, it's great connecting online and on our phones and things like that, but in terms of the development of babies and of families in general, for mental health and a sense of overall well-being, it's really important to have that rich social connected environment so that families thrive, and it really needs to be a priority in communities. It's reassuring, it's uplifting, it's that sharing and sense of belonging and sense of inclusion, that's to have that sense of that is really important. I remember going to one that I eventually found, and I just made a sigh of relief. You know, sharing things, hearing other people's experience, it just made me feel I'm not the only one. You know, it just it was so important. And also another experience was when you know, when my child was born and we were co-sleeping, and whenever, so I would try and get him put in this little crib that I bought, a really fancy crib. It was quite expensive, and I bought this sort of, it's called Next to Me, Baby Next to Me, and I got the dream hug thing that you sit them in or lay them in. But whenever I put him in it, he hated it. As soon as I brought him next to me, that was him. He was happy as Larry, couldn't have been more happier. And you know, that's what we done. We co-slept, and there was a time where I was absolutely, I really needed a break, and my baby's dad said, "Oh, I'll take him," and he was only 3 weeks old. And I said, okay. And I went into the other room, and I was just trying to rest and lay down and rest. And I could hear my baby cry, and I could not rest. I couldn't do it. And I went through, and I just wish I could share it with you on the video. But as soon as I walked into the room, it was like this stillness that could really be felt. And I looked over to him, and his eyes just went, his eyes were transfixed on me, and this stillness was like, wow, it just blew me away. And even thinking about it now, it gives me goosebumps, because it was just magical. It was magical, and I was like, oh my goodness, you know, and I could feel myself welling up, because it was just beautiful. And no one could see that, no one could hear that, but it was there. And it was just, and I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to say anything. I literally just walked into the room, and he just stopped. It was just like, wow, he just stopped. He just went from being really upset to whoosh, sheer peace. And as I say, it was magical. And what I've found by co-sleeping now, you know, from when I eventually moved him into his cot, he slept through. So I think by doing that, I set the tone of safety, so that he knew in those early stages, you know, that he was always, you know, his needs were being catered for. So when I moved him into the cot, I didn't get a peep from him. You know, I'd go in now and again, but as he got to about 2 and 3 and 4 years old, people would say, oh my goodness, he's so easy to go to bed. And how are you getting him sleep through? He never gets up. He'll go to bed, sleep anywhere. And he would often say to me, oh, Mum, it's time for me to go to my bed. He'd be telling me. And, you know, I think it's hard work at those early stages, but by putting in that routine, it pays dividends later on, you know, in terms of setting that root, if you like, again, going back to that root of that environment where you felt really rooted through that co-sleeping. And also, you know, we had done the on-demand feeding that really set a strong tone for later on, because it's that impression stayed with them as he became, you know, older, you know, through from about 2, 3, 4, right up, you know, the real sleep pattern was really set. So yeah, and yeah, and I think that's me really, and yeah, and
it's lovely, Lorna. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. And I just think it shows the real importance of listening to babies from the start, and you know, it makes life easier later on, hopefully, because you've got that lovely sort of bond and connection.
Yes, definitely. And it stays, and a lot of it's through the eyes, you know, it's through the eyes, because you know, through facial expressions and things like that. a lot of it is energy. You can't see it, but it's felt. It's like an atmosphere, isn't it? You know, an environment, and babies feel it and sense it as well. So yeah, and I really, really noticed that when I walked into the room that time when he was crying, and it was so thick and rich, just stillness, that it just blew me away. I was just like, oh my goodness. It was, yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your own personal experience as a parent. It's been lovely to hear, and I know that people really appreciate it. I am going to welcome our next speaker, our final speaker, Soraya Muthiah, and I'm absolutely delighted that she's been able to join us this morning. Soraya is a Strategic Commissioner with North Northamptonshire Council, and Soraya has extensive experience in working across local government and third sector organisations at senior and strategic levels, and she has recently been instrumental in setting up some of the earliest family hubs for local authorities. And I'm really interested to hear about her approach this morning. So welcome, Soraya.
Hello, hi. It's great to be here. And yeah, it was really interesting just listening to all of the speakers that have shared all of their experiences and wealth of knowledge so far. So as mentioned, yeah, my name's Soraya Muthiah. I've been supporting North Northants with developing the family hubs as their strategic lead for over 1.5 years now. I guess being part of this early establishments of family hubs has really been a journey, and with many challenges, you know, lots of learning and evolving along the way. And that, I guess, learning and evolving as the program does the same process of evolving from a program guide to delivering services that like kind of meet the DFE requirements. So yeah, it's been a very big learning experience. And today, what I'm here to do is really I aim to share our approach to including lived experiences in decision making for people of all ages, so including children, young people, and the importance of, you know, was really considering that through the commissioning cycle. So I'll take you on to the first slide, the next slide, sorry, where I guess it's just more in just a bit of context setting, really, like what is family hubs in North Northants. So in terms of context, North Northants is split into 4 local areas, and there's been a real focus on transferring our children's centres into family hubs. So 3 out of 4 of our areas have actual building physical sites for our family hubs. And one of the areas is more around that network of services because it's in a rural location. So actually having a building site was less feasible. And I guess I wanted to start off by setting the scene because the model in North Northants really relies heavily on developing and sustaining a partnership. So as you can see on the slide here, it's around bringing services together under a single umbrella through developing kind of operating procedures, looking more effectively, look how we can develop our systems, processes, procedures to operate under a single umbrella that we can all kind of have standardized approaches to working. Within that, we really recognise that we had to focus on building community ownership. So what does that community ownership look like? And to do that, we really needed to hear from different communities, as well as empowering our workforce to shape decision making. So looking at how we develop our insight and our learning and how we do that through upskilling our workforce and our provider network and our partnerships and our market as a whole. So I'm going to take you on to the next slide, please. And I thought it was really good just to pause, really. And I know that, we've got quite very varied representation in the room today. And just to focus from my perspective as a commissioner, we really had to look at actually, from a commissioning cycle, where does lived experience sit currently within family hubs in North Northants and within early help and within our children's services, and where do we want to be? So, when we think about commissioning is really focused on population outcomes. So, we must follow the 4 stages, of the commissioning cycle, which you can see on the screen today, which is around, analysing and looking at our gap analysis. Then we'd move on to looking at our plans. So actually, what are our plans for our future service to deliver, and actually, looking at then how we secure services and how do we review them as well. So when I joined North Northants, it was really clear that co-production often took place in 2 key stages. That was often that we had a lot of co-production and a lot of kind of listening to lived experience as part of a gap analysis. so which helped us to form our strategies and policies and action plans. And then that we would also have, you know, opportunities to have co-production lived experience in securing services. So, you know, where we use co-production groups mainly to sense check our planning and our priorities. Now, the Family Hubs Transformation Funding really gave us an opportunity to review this and think about how do we actively involve service users and lived experience in decision making at each stage in the commissioning cycle, actually. So, you know, recognizing the value of those diverse skill sets, the need for collective effort, and actually, you know, how do we bring people into the conversation at every stage? So, you know, we really had a really significant focus that was centered on conducting design exercises. Actually, you know, we was really focused on that. We had to do insight-led research projects to enhance our understanding of how, you know, as a complex system within Northamptonshire, we can collaboratively, you know, start to identify well, what are we doing well? What should we stop doing? What are the pathways to support as well? You know, are they fit for purpose? What processes are in place to identify and support parents, carers and families? You know, what support is available to babies, mothers, fathers and co-parents, and how effective is it? And how might we identify support needs earlier? And what opportunities exist for collaborative and innovative designs of services and solutions going forward? So we really wanted to start to look at that more collaboratively, more collectively in a partnership, and bringing more opportunities throughout the commissioning cycle to hear from children, young people and families of all ages. So I'm just going to move you on to the next slide now. So I'm going to share an example of how we started to do that, specifically looking at, you know, the analyze stage. So the diagram that I've shared here is unpicking that a little bit further. So when we talk about the analyze stage, we really wanted to focus on exploring the current state. So in doing that, exploring that current state within North Hants, what we decided to do is that we really wanted to work with our providers and our voluntary community sector organisations who are experts within their own right and who are already providing support for children and young people, so that they would have the ability to go out and gather insights to help to inform the current state on our behalf, recognising that actually those services are more closely linked to families. You know, they're delivering support to children and young people. So actually, what can we do to ensure that insight is being delivered in the places where people already go or the places that people already access? So one example of exploring the current state that we did in Northamptonshire is that we did the Voice of Children and Young People's project. So this project provided small grant funding through an expression of interest to voluntary organisations, community and faith groups to speak to children and young people throughout Northamptonshire, so to start to share their views and experiences of accessing services locally, and then also not just, you know, and so that we can start to understand, well, what does that look like for them? The research enabled the services, well, you know, the research is still taking place, but it has enabled the services to work directly with children and families over a 12-month project. So listening to children and young people, using creative mediums, using digital resources, focus groups in the places that they already visit. We found that actually providing more prolonged opportunities for people to do these research projects in the services allowed them to diversify their approaches as well. So, you know, within that, you know, if we take an example, we provided some funding to Croyland Nursery. So that's a nursery provider earlier setting. Who were able to work with the younger age groups through their nursery year setting, starting to listen to the kind of doing observations on children's and babies and starting to understand how they respond and you know, and how they can communicate through cues and expressions. And then, you know, and then on the other end of the spectrum, we provided, you know, the small grant funding to a voluntary community sector organisation that provides creative arts classes within schools for older age children, you know, from high school, from 11, 19 and 25 with SEND. So we've started to get, you know, really innovative and creative mediums where people are engaging over these 12-month projects to help us to really explore the current state and what it looks like for children and young people in Northamptonshire. So I guess that was just an example of exploring the current state. And like I said, from a commissioning perspective, we were looking at this in stage 1, which is the current state, stage 3, which is looking at actually, well, what does that planning phase look like? We need to focus on what the future state would look like. What are our solutions? What are our opportunities? And then that will inform the final stage around any improvement plans that we're able to put in place in response to listening to children and families. Throughout all of those stages, I think, the diagram here is really around what we need to consider in these stages is the processes, the people, the structures and the technology that's available to assist us in being able to put in any plans or priorities around these areas that are identified by children and families. So I will move you on to the next slide, which is just expanding again and further on exploring that current state, is that as part of the Children and Young People's Project and as part of kind of other commissioned insight research that we've done through needs assessments or development of strategies and policies, it was really clear that, that often that we can do these pieces of work and they become static documents. So we had to think a little bit further, well, how do we share this information across the system actually? How do we make this show that lived experiences is heard by practitioners from, your management, from your senior leadership, all the way down to your operational and frontline practitioners? So one opportunity for us to do that is that we was really keen that we wanted to create a real life, we wanted to capture these real life experiences in a voice bank. So that would serve as like a valuable resource of children and young people's thoughts, worries, hopes, insights, and that this information is crucial for professionals to grasp and respond to what children and young people want from services. So actually we need to make it everybody's business and not just a commissioning function, but actually that everyone's starting to access lived experience. So one approach to that is that we established a Padlet, a professional, which acts as our professionals portal. In the interim, the long-term ambition is that we will have our Family Hubs front door for a microsite. But for now, we're using an Padlet, and that's provided where we've kind of put in case studies and examples, where we've shared the insights from the Children and Young People's Voice projects. And it's really a good opportunity to expose people to lived experience, to help to cultivate empathy and compassion, helping professionals to develop a deeper understanding and different perspective and experiences from the cases that they work with. And it can also lead to more supportive and inclusive services, as well as we design and services and with the voice of lived experience at the kind of centre of our decision making. So that's just I just wanted to share an example how, we've kind of evolved from that, making sure that we kind of sharing those that current state and that information that we're getting across the system as well. So I'll move you on to the next slide, please. Yeah. So, I mean, the next bit was around actually, so when we're defining our future state, we really wanted to focus on, well, what does that co-design look like? How do we co-design and co-develop the services? And in Northants, we started to implement an engagement framework to help shape future direction of services. So, the why and the what and the how has pretty much been covered in terms of the previous slides, where we've talked around the importance of linking it to the commissioning cycle, to gather intelligence, to plan services, to analyse and to take action. But we also had to agree on the strategic objectives of where lived experience will support. So for us, I'm just going to highlight the strategic objectives of this work for us was really around actually we wanted to listen to lived experience. Mainly the focus is around to ensure that we get the right help at the right time in the right place, so that we were responding to need appropriately, and that we've got iterative processes of using and kind of hearing from lived experience and feeding back, providing the use aids we did and making sure that actually that we're responding to the need that we're hearing, which is paramount in terms of our strategic objectives. We also wanted to, we were really clear that we needed a centralized database as well. So one thing that we really wanted to do is that not only did we want to listen to individual voices, but actually we wanted to develop a Family Hubs data dashboard, which was focused on focused on aggregating service level and population level data, so we can start to track our success in achieving positive outcomes. So we start to understand trends and as a system and as a partnership, so that we can champion the use of data and insight to kind of develop services in response to need and in response to demographics and in response to kind of local need and population as well. So that was one of our strategic objectives, is that, you know, we really need to kind of have robust mechanisms for gathering intelligence and also analysing it and then tracking it and sharing it. And then the last strategic objective that we wanted to focus on as part of our co-design and co-development of services is that we wanted to make sure that we had meaningful representation on our boards and our panels. And in order to do that, we recognise that we're having to look at how we empower people with lived experience to take ownership of co-design processes, how we can empower people to feel like active members, to participate in decision making, problem solving and implementation as well. So a lot of that is what we're exploring currently, is around how do we invest significantly in building the capacity of people with lived experience to engage meaningfully in service design and development and evaluation as well, because I always say that engaging in council business is big business essentially, you know, and actually we need to prepare people to feel that they have a seat at the table or feel that they're able to kind of join in conversations and discussions and support service design and development. So that's the bit that I just wanted to share broadly on co-design and co-development. And then on the last slide, I guess I just wanted to end on a final note, really, which is I wanted to share an example of this in practice. So where we followed all of the stages in terms of kind of working with and co-producing a video project with parents and caregivers to help them to interpret baby cues, to find the best ways to meet their baby's needs. You know, because a lot of the insight work that we did, parents shared that, you know, that they often were overwhelmed with information or felt bombarded with information. And we also did a lot of kind of insight and learning and understanding how parents want to receive information, how they want information to be provided to them. And a lot came back around kind of the use of video and multimedia, and they found that that was quite accessible and that they were able to pick up information quite easily that way. And then, you know, so we pulled all of that together as part of our infant feeding work stream. And it was also identified by healthcare professionals that, you know, a lot of the time responsive feeding information lacks evidence-based information. It's not accessible, it's not in the format. So, you know, we then went on to develop our improvement plan for infant feeding. And we're working very closely with Anna Freud in terms of developing our perinatal mental health and parent relationship strategy and our infant feeding action plan in North Hants. And this video, I guess, is one of the examples of where we've secured a video project based on a need that's been identified by our parents and families, and shaped that video co-produced it with parents, carers and families